Welcome back to Black News Tonight. Earlier today, Texas joined the long list of GOP-led states enacting new voter restrictions as Governor Greg Abbott signed the State Bill 1 into law. Titled the Election Integrity Law, SB 1 imposes a list of new voting restrictions across the Lone Star State, such as banning drive-thru and 24-hour voting, distribution of mail-in ballot applications, criminalizing ballot harvesting as a third-degree felony, watcher protection, expanding poll watcher protections, as well as new citizenship checks. Now, at the signing ceremony, Governor Abbott winked at other states who might be following suit in passing similar laws.
Texas obviously is a national leader as it concerns the laws that we pass and other states follow. And if other states are looking for a paradigm of what is a good approach to make sure that everybody who wants to vote is going to have the opportunity to do so, this is that type of bill.
This is that type of bill, he says. Joining me now to discuss is BNC contributor Teslyn Figaro, who is also the host of podcast Straight Shot, No Chaser. I'm going to need one of them after this debate. I also have GOP strategist and political commentator Melik Abdul joining me. Welcome to the show, both of you. Let's just get this thing started. Melik, I'm going to start with you. The governor used the word paradigm for other states regarding the new law. What is that paradigm in your estimation?
Well, I assume that what he's referring to is that because Texas being the size that it is, that a lot of other states would follow. But Texas actually came behind Florida and Georgia. So I don't know if a paradigm shift is the word that I would use simply in reference to Texas. But there are similarities to what happened in Texas, Florida, and Georgia, particularly around things like voter ID. So all three states actually had in-person voting requirements. And so what Texas did, which is similar to what happened in Georgia and Florida, is that they actually, streamlined is not a good word. I wouldn't actually use that. But it actually made it easier if you think about it, even for poll workers. So they said that what you now have to do in order to request an absentee ballot, again, this is not about voter ID in person, because they already had in-person voter ID requirements. But if you want to vote, by absentee ballot, that instead of trying to figure out what a voter meant or things like that, is that you would actually have either your voter ID, the last four of your social security number, or you can even cast provisional ballots to be able to, I think in some instances, have things like identification, like utility bills or things like that. But there are other things that people are talking about that are that they believe controversial, like the 24-hour voting, the 24-hour voting, the drive-through voting, and those two things particularly were done in response to the pandemic. Will we be at the same levels with the pandemic in 2024, or by the time the next election rolls around in Texas? I'm really not sure, but I don't have a problem with them eliminating things, because similarly here in Washington, D.C., in response to not being able to vote in person, our mayor for the very first time installed ballot boxes all around the city. I doubt very seriously that we will have the same number, if any, ballot boxes in 2024. And I'm okay with that. And I don't think that the mayor would be suppressing the vote if she removes those ballot boxes, which is kind of what happened in Georgia with their ballot boxes, is that they actually made ballot boxes permanent because they didn't exist prior to 2020.
So Teslyn, a couple things here, and Melik has said this as well, but Governor Abbott said that SB 1 is enacted to make it easier for everybody to vote and harder for cheaters to cheat. And then Melik has also added this other slice of the argument, which is that many of the provisions that he's taking away were things that were temporary anyway. These were COVID, pandemic-prompted policy measures. What do you say?
Well, what I say is to my alleged conservative Christians, Leviticus 19:14 says, "Do not curse the deaf. Don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind, and to fear the Lord." And what has happened with this particular policy, they have literally put a stumbling block in front of those who are disabled and making it harder for them to vote by requesting and demanding that those who offer assistance fills out paperwork and providing their ID in order to just simply push someone in a wheelchair in order to vote. Secondly, when we talk about this voting fraud myth, let's deal with the real numbers, Mark. 16 million people in Texas in 2020 voted. Do you know how many fraud cases there were? 0.0006%. That's 4 zeros, Mark. Let's really talk about that in the numbers. Less than 500 people were actually even the cases even presented, which have not been prosecuted yet. When we talk about 500, the average high school is 850 people. 52,000 people go to Joel Osteen's church on a weekly basis. So the idea that there is wide voter fraud, the idea that this is about IDs is simply just a lie. This is about furthering not allowing people to go to the polls. When they say, oh, we've expanded the hours, that's not true. That's basically saying that, oh, if you go vote between 10 and 6, we'll allow you to vote. Banning the 24-hour voting was not just because it was the pandemic, which we're still in a pandemic, by the way, Melik, but not just because it was a pandemic, but it allowed people in Harris County an opportunity to be able to vote for those who work 2 and 3 and 4 jobs that needed that access. And I don't know if Melik's ever helped anyone in a wheelchair or not. I certainly have. And drive-through voting actually makes it easier so that people don't have to get the wheelchair in and out, and make it accessible to our seniors, disabled, and to people of color.
So Melik, and by the way, Teslyn, I think you quoted more Bible verses in your response than Joel Osteen does in the whole week. But Melik, there is some sermons I don't be knowing. Melik, she raises an interesting point. Teslyn raises an interesting point here, right? I mean, 24-hour voting makes things easier. Extending hours makes things easier. Drive-throughs make things easier. Why take those things away? Even if they were even if they were temporary, even if they were initially designed in a pandemic, why take them away? How could we not make an argument that makes things harder, not easier?
Yeah, so I think that's actually very valid point. Why take it away if it's popular or if it's something that you implemented? But the problem is that what ends up happening is that any changes that makes it more difficult or, takes things away that were implemented in reference to whatever, then those things can easily be described as voter suppression. That's the problem that I have with this entire argument.
But hold on, Melik, hold on. That's an end run around the question. What you effectively just said is, yeah, I see how it's a problem, but you don't like that when we take it away, people point it out and call it suppression. My question is, why take it away if it's working, if it's popular, and it makes it easier for people to vote? Why take it away? What's the argument for taking it away?
Well, I don't know what their justification was in Texas, but it definitely seems like this was part of a larger effort that's been happening in GOP states. Their argument is that they want to add safeguards to the election. I don't think that we should really, because if you listen to the national discussion, what we're literally talking about are specifically those two things, the 24-hour voting and the drive-through voting. Again, those things they're as popular as they may be, they were implemented in response to the pandemic, people not being able to vote in person. The same thing happened in Georgia.
I'm not following your argument. I'm not following your argument. It's like saying my house is on. Melik, it's like if my house were on fire and I implemented a sprinkler system, and then after we put out the fire, you say, well, we only had the sprinkler system because there was a fire. Well, yeah, but now that we know sprinkler systems are good, why would we get rid of it? I understand you said you don't know the argument for it. So would you be willing to say here on national TV that you disagree with the GOP position on 24-hour voting and drive-thrus?
No, I don't have a problem with that at all, and that's why I use Washington, D.C. as an example. The mayor has not given any indication that she's going to keep those ballot boxes for the 2024 election cycle. If she chooses not to do that, then technically you could say that that's voter suppression because it decreases the opportunity for people to vote. My point in saying this,
let's say it is. Let's say it is. Go ahead.
Let me finish my point, but I'm wrapping this in the larger discussion of things that were implemented in response to the pandemic. The Bipartisan Policy Center, maybe around the early part of last year, talked about the sheer difficulty in moving to a all-mail system during a pandemic. A lot of states at the time, they implemented emergency measures, which is similar to what happened in Georgia with the ballot boxes. Prior to 2020, Georgia did not have ballot boxes at all. That emergency declaration that installed them, it expired. But what the Georgia legislature did, they actually made ballot boxes permanent. No, not in the same number as they were during, the 2020 election cycle. And sure, people could argue because it's not the same number of ballot boxes that they'll have, that's voter suppression. I just don't think that that's actually a very good example of voter suppression. Does it remove opportunities for people to vote? Sure, but it's not voter suppression in the context of what we're having this discussion.
Did he just say sure? Okay, so let me give you some more examples. Go ahead, Mark. Since he doesn't like those examples.
Please doesn't.
You keep landing on voter ID. You do the same thing every time. You say voter ID, and then you say the 24-hour banning, the banning of the 24-hour access. It's not just that. It's partisan poll watchers, which is voter intimidation. It's restricting people from being able to mail out applications for the ballot, for absentee ballot, who are particular for those who need that, disabled and elderly. And everyone doesn't always know when to vote. When you talk about special elections, you talk about elections that go all throughout the year. They don't even want folks to inform people on when it is actually to vote. It also restricts souls to the polls, specifically targeted to Black folks. There's a number of things that are on this besides voter ID, which I already dispelled that myth because that's usually what you say first. But then now you're going to the pandemic. Well, we're still in the pandemic. And then when we talk about banning 24 hours, that was just in Harris County, one county, which just happens to be the largest county, the fourth largest city in the country. So it's almost as if every time we give you an argument, you kind of move the goalposts. The bottom line is these are restrictive measures all the way across the board, pandemic, pro-pandemic, after pandemic. It's bottom line designed to restrict. And Mark's question was simple. If it's working to allow more people to the polls, and if you don't have the facts and evidence to prove that there has been fraud in massive numbers, we've had more people who have died of carbon monoxide poisoning in the state of Texas when they failed earlier this year with the power outage, by the way, than those who have did any type of fraud, which has not even been proven. So what is your answer, Melik? Give us one solid answer on why is it that Texas and other states, Georgia, are following suit on restrictive measures other than not wanting to get the polls.
I got to actually end it there because I already went over time, but I'm going to have y'all back. And Melik, when we come back, I know you're going to have these answers. And Teslyn, I know you're going to have more questions, and he's going to have some questions for you to answer, too.
We're going to give him time to study up, Mark.
Melik don't need no time to study. He know these answers, man. He just messing with us, man. This is all performance art. I love y'all, man. Melik, Teslyn, I'll see y'all later. Everybody, stay with me. I also want you to join the conversation. Let us know how you feel. Make sure you go to BNC News. Check out our Twitter. Check out our Instagram. Do all of that stuff. Also, go to our YouTube channel so you can check out clips from the show. Stay with me. We got much more coming up right after the break.